Episode 31, The Silver Ship. Cobal stood in one of the thin, dimly lit hallways on the Flying Croc, King K. Rool's personal aircraft. The Flying Croc had a fairly terrible smell throughout that seemed to him somewhat akin to gasoline, and was lit by flickering green lights. It was clearly a ship that had seen better days. Surprisingly, considering the ragtag nature of their group, intercepting the Goombino Mafia had proved fairly easy. Currently the Goombas were tied up and thrown into the Flying Croc's brig. Strike didn't want to risk the Koopa Troop soldiers apprehending the gangsters and getting them to reveal how he was working with rebels. The information they had given was scarce. The Goombinos had made a deal with 7 Stars, a syndicate that was the undisputed power in the international underworld. Apparently they had a contract in which the Goombinos were going to deliver to 7 Stars flight rocks, strange purple stones which were excellent power sources for levitation devices. According to Toad Burt, the Koopa Troop had done a fair bit of flight rock mining back in the day, particularly during a point in time in which a dimensional portal had been opened to a reality where everything was paper. Bowser had lifted his castle into the air with massive engines powered by these rocks. The Goombinos had, after some particularly intense questioning by Strike, revealed that one of 7 Stars' leaders was going to meet up with them on an unnamed island 3 miles south of Delfino. That was the island they were currently on.
Blast me fangs, I thought we were done there.
Cobal heard K. Rool hiss from the bridge, which was right next to corridor. Cobal was in there.
If it hadn't have been for that cloaking shield that nearly bankrupted me, that blockade would have turned me into fried reptile.
Cobal turned the wheel on the heavy iron door and stepped into the Flying Croc's bridge. The bridge of the last remnant of the Kremlin Cruise Authority was in a sorry state, although Cobal wondered if K. Rool had ever kept it tidy to begin with. The green paint on the metal walls was peeling off in places, and there was miscellaneous junk pushed to every side. Prince Peasley was sitting atop a large barrel, seemingly keeping to himself. K. Rool was stalking around in the center, while Strike seemed to be enduring him.
What are the specs on this thing?
Strike asked K. Rool seriously. Cobal could tell the Fire Bro was having difficulty addressing the Kremlin King, as if he was not quite sure if K. Rool was about to suddenly turn on him.
I will be blunt here, it's a piece of junk. Oh, the Flying Croc has the absolute highest specs.
Came a high-pitched voice from the co-pilot's seat at the front of the bridge. Cobal noticed that a large blue Kremling wearing a muscle shirt was sitting there. The Kremling raised a claw and grinned.
The boss bought this old flyer way back at the underworld auction. Said it was the best deal of his life. Just because he bought it for cheap doesn't mean it's worth anything.
Strike replied bluntly, crossing his arms.
Yes, shut up, Crusha.
K. Rool shouted.
My ego's already low enough as it is, you don't need to go telling them stuff like that. We're ready to fly off when you are, sir.
Came a voice from the pilot's seat. Cobal noticed that it was occupied by a brown Kremling wearing an army helmet.
The Kremlin crew is ready for action. An amazing display of leadership, General Clump, considering you and Crusha are the only one of those dimwits who decided to stick with me.
King K. Rool hissed, continuing to pace back and forth.
And sometimes I wish you hadn't.
Cobal noticed that Peasley didn't seem to be interacting with anyone at all. In fact, the Bean Prince had remained quite silent since the fight in the tavern. Cobal did not quite know why he had brought him. It seemed like the right idea at the time, him being essentially the Bean Kingdom's equivalent to Mario back in his prime. Feeling a little concerned for him, Cobal closed the door behind him and crossed the floor to Peasley.
What's up?
He asked.
You ready to meet these 7 Stars people?
Peasley looked up at Cobal, a distant look in his eye.
Listen to me, Yoshi, because I will be frank.
He said sadly, while in the background the three Kremlings began to bicker.
I don't know who you think I am. Yes, I was a hero once, but that was a long time ago. I don't even know if I remember all my beanish fencing techniques. As far as I'm concerned, the whole concept of heroes died with the Mario brothers.
Hey! Cobal said, sitting down next to him on a wooden crate.
Luigi's still out there. He's still being a hero. He taught me, you know.
Peasley's eyes instantly lit up.
Luigi's alive.
He smiled.
My, this is good news.
He shook his head in disbelief.
You know, we got along rather well.
Peasley admitted. To Cobal, his voice sounded distant and nostalgic.
He seemed much more gentlemanly, really. Mario was a great man but rather crude. I always thought Luigi deserved better than getting killed by those Koopas, you know.
Cobal smiled. It felt good, bringing hope to people like this. It was amazing what the news that one of the Mario brothers had survived could bring to people. If Luigi's name carried such weight with it, what would it have been like to see both of the bros in action? Not for the first time, Cobal felt himself wishing he had been born in another time.
I still can't be the man you think I am.
Peasley sighed.
But perhaps I won't give up on heroes just yet, if Luigi indeed survived. We're working to restore the Mushroom Kingdom right now.
Cobal nodded.
Hey, if you come with us, maybe the Bean Kingdom can get restored too. It's in an awful state.
Peasley admitted sadly.
All that's left of Castle Town is a giant crater. But still, I thank you for your optimism.
The day spent within the hot, stuffy confines of the Flying Croc was quite tiresome. It was made all the worse by the fact that the group really didn't get along. Strike and Peasley still kept shooting hostile looks at each other, and K. Rool and his two cronies got on everyone's nerves, including Cobal's. The shadows lengthened outside as the sun dipped below the horizon, dyeing the sky orange, until night finally descended on the small, unnamed island. The time of the meetup between Seven Stars and the Goombinos was fast approaching. Eventually, King K. Rool gave the order to get the Flying Croc up into the air. This had been part of a plan devised by Strike to contact the Seven Stars members through communications channels. The advantage to that was that Seven Stars would be unable to see their faces, so if they turned out to be untrustworthy, they would be unable to give their identities away. Cobal stood on the bridge between the pilot and co-pilot's seats, staring out of the green-tinted window out at the cloudy night sky. They right over the open sea right now? Far away from anyone. It was a bad business, Cobal couldn't deny that, but at the same time he knew this meeting could provide valuable info he couldn't afford to miss.
Is it just me, or are you getting chills right now, Clump?
Krusha asked from the co-pilot's seat.
It's just the weather, Krusha, you should know by now that our heating systems broke down.
Clump shot back from the pilot's seat. Cobal, however, knew that wasn't exactly the case. Even though, true, the Flying Croc was uncomfortably cold, Cobal felt extremely nervous about meeting one of the leaders of the mysterious crime syndicate. He glanced in Peasley's direction. The Bean Prince was sitting on the same barrel he had been on earlier, although his face had a stronger, more driven look to it. That was better, at least.
What are the weapons on this thing?
Strike asked K. Rool seriously. K. Rool shrugged.
Some guns.
He replied.
Don't ask for details, I'm a king, not a mechanic.
Strike sighed and made no further comment.
Boss, we got something big coming up on the radar.
Clump spoke up. K. Rool peered closer.
Let's see what this baby has to offer.
He hissed, baring his pointed teeth. Suddenly, a silver light shone through the skies. Slowly, out of the clouds, a huge ship began to emerge, nearly 10 times the size of the flying croc. It seemed to be made of a shiny, silvery material covered in white lights, and had a sleek, futuristic design with 2 large, smooth spurs jutting forward. It was coming right towards them, as if to trap them between its vice-like prow. Cobal was definitely shaking now. There was something that seemed alien and ghostly about the ship, like it was something impossible to understand but could only bring bad tidings.
"Guess that's our guy,"
he said.
"Give him a call,"
K-Rool ordered. Krusha jammed a few buttons on his control panel, but nothing seemed to happen.
It ain't working, boss,"
he exclaimed in a panic.
"The transmission's working, but they don't seem to wanna answer." "I suspected as much,"
Strike said icily, taking a few steps forward.
"They expected to meet with the Gumbinos, not with us. Most likely they'll start firing at us any minute now." "That true, boss?"
Clump asked, scratching his head as he turned around to look at his king.
"Because if so, shouldn't we be getting out of here?" "You don't need me to tell you that, you nitwit!"
K-Rool shouted, smacking Clump hard on the top of his head.
"Hey, not so fast!"
Cobal said, running up and standing between the 2 huge Kremlings. He hadn't done all of this for nothing.
"We gotta find a way to board that ship. I'm talking to 7 stars. If your heart is really set on this, I can get you in,"
Strike said, matter-of-factly. He snapped his fingers, igniting a flame on the tip of his finger.
"At the military academy, I learned a fire hand technique involving concentrating your flame into a super hot laser. It's designed to cut through armor. If we get dropped off on that ship, then I can get you in." "You know, I don't think I've ever been so happy to have you here,"
Cobal replied, grinning at Strike. The plan seemed extremely risky. But that was all part of the draw. Maybe Luigi wouldn't have approved of it, but Luigi also wasn't here.
"I will accompany you,"
Peasley said suddenly, sliding to the ground and walking towards Cobal and Strike.
"If I really want to do something with my life, I am not going to accomplish it by sitting around." "Excellent,"
Strike nodded, before turning to K-Rool.
"King K-Rool, do you understand what your role in this is?"
K-Rool scratched his head.
"I drop you guys off, right?"
he asked.
"Sounds like you all really want to die, but whatever. This is the most fun I've had in years."
Wind whipped around Cobal as he stood in the small hangar bay of the Flying Croc, Strike and Peasley beside him. The silver ship was below him, its white lights blinking. Cobal could see gun emplacements covering the hull. This was a warship through and through. Probably more than a match for anything in the Koopa Empire's fleet.
"You ready?"
he shouted over the roar of the wind.
"Naturally,"
Strike replied, as if he did something like this every day. Then Cobal leaped. He fell through the air for about 20 seconds, before landing firmly on the ship's smooth surface. He straightened himself, careful that his boots didn't slip, and thanked the stars it wasn't raining. Strike and Peasley landed firmly beside him. Immediately, Strike pointing at the shiny surface before him and fired a thin beam of flame, drilling a circular entrance for them. Peasley crossed his arms together, his white cape flapping in the wind. There was a clang, and the piece of hull Strike had been cutting away it fell down.
"We're in,"
he said simply. Cobal, following Strike, dropped into the silver ship and found himself in a corridor lit by white lights. It was wider than the claustrophobic walkways in the Flying Croc, and the walls were curved at a sharp, almost triangular angle. It was extremely silent, except for the wind whistling through the hole Strike had created, and Cobal got the strange sense that he did not belong here. They made their way down the corridor, encountering nobody, until they eventually found a door. By now Cobal's heart was beating and he asked himself why he was so nervous. He had heard the tales of Luigi's adventures through various haunted mansions. Was this how he felt? Cobal took a step forward. The door slid open. Cobal stepped into what was clearly the ship's bridge. It was a large room, with a huge window at the end looking out into the night. Strangely, he could not see the flying croc. The walls were covered in white-colored screens, and he could tell they were on a raised platform of sorts. Closer to the window there appeared to be a kind of bit, out of which were coming the sounds of technology and low voices. Directly in front of them, looking over the control pit, was a large, metal chair.
"Well then,"
Cobal said loudly.
"Let's get this over with."
There was a low hiss as the chair turned around. Cobal saw that the person sitting in it was a Kremling, although one that looked quite different from King K. Rool and his henchmen. He was quite a bit thinner, first of all, and his scales were pure black. The Kremling was dressed in a silver-colored trench coat.
"I'm sure you can understand that I don't take kindly to people barging in on my ship unannounced,"
the Kremling said in a low voice, his clawed hands clasped on his lap.
"Please, explain yourself." "My name is Cobal,"
Cobal said, stepping forward. The Kremling regarded him with an aloof, indifferent look.
"I'm against the Koopa Empire. I take it you aren't with them either, right?"
The Kremling laughed and rose from his chair.
"My friend Cobal,"
the Kremling smiled,
"I am not with either you or them. My loyalty is exclusively to the Grand Star. You may call me
Silver Star.
I was on my way to secure a profitable deal when you waylaid me. I do not enjoy being held up by complications, you understand."
He smiled again, and Cobal saw his eyes glittering. Somehow, Cobal got the idea that he had made a very bad mistake.
"Here at 7 Stars we pride ourselves in our secrecy,"
Silver Star said, holding up a clawed hand and examining it.
"Even most underworld gangs have to be very well connected to even know we exist. The thought of 3 outsiders in one of our command ships is preposterous. My course of action is obvious. You 3, or course, must die."
Before Cobal could do a thing, Prince Peasley was before him, his rapier drawn and pointing right at the Silver Star.
"You villain!"
Peasley exclaimed.
"I'll have no more of this."
"So be it," Silver Star replied, raising his claws. There was a burst of silver-colored circle, triangle, and square runes, and a long, curved sword appeared within his hand. Even as Peasley and the Kremling dashed at each other, Strike had already launched a fireball the Silver Star's way. The black reptile casually ducked under it and made a slash at Peasley, who barely parried it. Cobal ran across the smooth floor and leapt at the Silver Star. The Silver Star lashed out with his foot, kicking Peasley away, before swiping his left claw around and catching Cobal hard. Cobal went flying through the air, crashing against the command seat. Strike and Silver Star faced each other down, Strike igniting fireballs in both of his hands. He ran at Silver Star, launching both of them, which were quickly blocked by the flat of the Kremling's blade. Strike ducked underneath a slice that would have taken off his head and leaped forward, one of his feet ignited. He kicked the Kremling in the chest, slamming him across the bridge. Silver Star dug his blade in the ground to slow his flight, kicking up sparks. By now both Cobal and Peasley were up and running towards their adversary. Cobal's mind was racing. He had got them into this position. Because he had been stupid enough to try to gain intel from these people when he had no real knowledge of where they really stood on things, he had gotten them into this fight with a powerful enemy on his own ship. No time for regrets now, though. He had to finish this. As the Silver Star drove Strike back with a series of lightning-fast slashes, Cobalt leapt towards him, aiming to stop on his head. As if he had foresight, the Silver Star spun around, knocking Cobalt to the ground with the flat of his blade. As Cobalt hit the floor, he saw Peasley aim a slash at the Kremling, who deflected it, sending the two swordsmen into a lightning-fast exchange of blows.
You will never overcome the pride of the Beanish people,
Peasley gasped, fighting for breath as he fended off one of the enemy's blows.
The Bean Kingdom died a long time ago.
Silver Star laughed, fending off one of Peasley's strikes.
You're irrelevant on the modern stage.
He brutally kicked Peasley, sending him flying across the room and nearly hitting Strike, who was rushing forward again, launching fireballs at rapid speed. They streaked across the room, dyeing the silver floor orange, as Silver Star met them with his blade, expertly fending them off. Cobalt saw his chance. He ran at Silver Star, hoping to catch him while he was focused on Strike. A foot away from him, Cobalt saw Silver Star's eyes briefly rest upon him. The Kremling bent backwards, ducking under Strike's fireballs, before spinning around and grabbing Cobalt by the head. Cobalt felt the cold grip of his claws as Silver Star hurled him through the air. This time, Cobalt went soaring past the command chair and landing in the control pit. Dazed, Cobalt saw many uniformed people of many species sitting at chairs manning control consoles, each one dressed in a silver military-style jacket and wearing a silver visor. Above him, there was an orange flash as Strike let off an especially large fire blast. The crew members had surrounded him. Cobalt blinked, restoring his distorted vision. Right in front him, below the upper level where the command seat was, he could see a white screen depicting a map of the area. Supposedly, they were near a large fortress called Stoneshell Prison. Strange, that wasn't on any of the maps of Sector 3 he had seen. Above him, Cobalt saw the glint of Silver Star's sword as he fended off another one of Strike's fireballs. The fire bro was so talented, but this strange black Kremling was on a whole different level.
Come quietly, sir,
said a uniformed Kupa standing in front of him.
The Silver Star has you cornered. It's best you surrender now while your limbs are still attached to your body.
Cobalt smirked.
Not a chance,
he said, before leaping up into a flutter, jump. He saw Strike running at Silver Star, his fist trailing fire, while Silver Star, grinning wickedly, drew back his sword for a stab. A vision flashed through his eyes of Strike impaled on his enemy's cold, wicked blade. Thinking fast, Cobalt spun around and extended his tongue, drawing the Kupa bridge officer into his mouth and encasing him in an eggshell. He hurled the egg with all his might just as Strike reached Silver Star. The egg struck the Kremling on the shoulder, causing him to cry out and lose balance, allow Strike's punch to connect with a fiery explosion. Silver Star was sent flying 5 feet back, his coat smoking.
Appreciate the hand there, Cobalt,
Strike said, gasping for breath.
No prob, Corporal.
Cobalt grinned. He was feeling exhausted though, and his entire body ached from Silver Star's blows. How much longer could they keep this up? Peasley rejoined them, looking winded. With a shaky arm, he pointed his rapier at Silver Star, who was rising. The black Kremling dusted himself off and hissed.
I had taken you for over-curious idiots who had somehow found a way aboard my ship, but it seems like you all have a measure of training,
he said, his eyes narrowing.
I might actually have to give this some thought.
He extended his free hand, and, with another burst of silver light, summoned a second sword. Cobalt braced himself. Okay. So this guy hadn't even got started yet, and they were all at the end of their strength. This was bad. Really bad. Battle of Toad Town level bad. The Silver Star advanced, the white light from the monitors reflecting off his swords. In that moment the Kremling looked like a manifestation of death, come to claim their lives at long last. Then, quite abruptly, the bridge's main window exploded. Shards of glass suddenly flew through the air as the sound of gunfire erupted around them. The bridge crew screamed as they fought to escape the control pit, which was directly in the line of fire. The Silver Star stopped his advance to gape in shock. Cobal turned his head. There it was in all of its green, run-down glory. The Flying Croc, with guns blazing.
It's K-Rool!
He exclaimed, running forward, ignoring the shards of glass that whizzed past him, slicing at his neck.
Don't you dare think you're getting away with this!
The Silver Star yelled, brandishing his swords.
You don't know the true scope of our organization or the influence of my partners on the board. Do you really?
Strike let loose a large fireball, lighting up the room and blasting the Silver Star into the far wall.
Come on, Peasley!
He shouted. Peasley hesitated, seemingly wanting to continue the fight, before turning and following Strike back into the control pit. A uniformed Toad and Shy Guy cowered under the seats next to them as Cobal leapt through the shattered bridge window into the night sky. Fluttering his legs, he crashed into the Flying Croc's hangar as the Kremling aircraft brought itself up close, allowing Strike and Peasley to make the jump. Then, with such a burst of speed it sent Cobal falling onto the hard metal surface, it reversed directions and blasted off into the clouds. By the time Cobal made it to the Flying Croc's bridge, he was feeling a combination of overwhelmed and dizzy. King K-Rool stood in the center of the room, his large arms crossed.
So?
He said, his right eye bulging.
Exactly what did you accomplish there? Scoped out a potential threat.
Cobal gasped as Peasley and Strike entered the room.
Plus, as an extra bonus, I've discovered something. Cloaking shields on, boss.
Clump reported, interrupting him.
Unless that ship's got better scanners than the Koopas, we're invisible. Don't assume they don't.
Strike cut in.
The technology on the ship looked more advanced than what most Koopa battleships carry. All right, then.
K-Rool sighed in annoyance.
Clump, let Crusher drive. He'll make us all sick with nausea, but at least he's such a bad pilot and his map reading skills are so poor his course will be impossible to follow. Gee, thanks for the compliment, boss.
Crusher replied in a voice that didn't sound ironic at all to Cobal. Cobal glanced around when he heard Peasley sigh.
Some hero I am.
The Bean Prince shook his head, looking at his rapier.
I used to be unmatched in a duel. You're rusty.
Strike said bluntly.
It's called practice.
Peasley looked at him, before looking back at his sword. Cobal hoped he wasn't about to get into another argument.
What was the new piece of info you got, Cobal?
Strike asked curiously, his blue eyes intent on him. Cobal scratched his head, wincing as he shifted on one foot and felt his bruises.
It's probably nothing.
He admitted, the sounds of the Flying Croc's ancient-seeming engine clattering around him.
But I saw something on that ship's map that wasn't on any of the other ones. Some place called Stoneshell Prison.
Strike stroked his chin.
Stoneshell Prison.
He mused.
I've heard of it. It's the Koopa Empire's maximum security prison. The place where they stuck all of Mario's allies after the Mushroom Kingdom fell.
Suddenly, all of the pain Cobalt felt seemed to instantly disappear.
Wait! What?
He exclaimed.
You mean the kind of guys like Captain Toad and Donkey Kong?
Strike nodded.
All the big names,
he replied.
The kind of people who could be a threat to an entire garrison single-handedly. Then that's where we're headed next,
Cobalt replied, gazing out of the Flying Croc's main window. The moon peeked through the clouds, shining its light down upon them.
I'll follow,
Strike replied.
I'm interested in you, Cobalt,
the Fire Bro admitted.
I want to see how far your will take you. And I'm coming,
K. Rool announced.
Because you, kid, just reminded me of what it felt like to be the Kremlin king again. Yeah.
Peasley nodded from the corner.
I have to reclaim my honor, or I'll never be able to face my people once the Bean Kingdom is restored.
Cobalt tightened his right hand into a fist.
Then let's do this,
he said, gazing up at the moon.
Let's free the heroes and bring down the Empire. Luigi is counting on us.